Anthony Camacho. I'm a Public Information Officer for the City of Aurora Police Department. This evening we're going to be discussing the death of a subject that occurred in the presence of our officers after they responded to a disturbance call in the 10,600 block of East Jewell Avenue. This occurred on December 17th of 2018. Speaking tonight will be the Chief of Police, Chief Metz, as well as the District Attorney, George Brockler. We do want to caution you up front, we have limited information to give, and we please ask that you hold your questions until we're done. Chief.
All right, good afternoon, folks. First of all, I just want to thank all of you for coming all the way out here. We know this was a long drive, and we appreciate you accommodating us on this. We have a lot of different events that are going on here, and this worked out for the best in what we needed to take care of, so thank you again. As was just said, we are here to talk about the death of a member of our community. Obviously, this is a very important and serious issue that we want to make sure that we are providing the highest quality investigation and transparency. As was said earlier, there's not a lot of information we are really going to be able to share, or at least specific information, because this investigation is active as we are speaking. There's a lot of things that still need to occur during this investigation, but we felt it was important to give the community at least, I guess, a bit of an idea of what occurred last night, and to have a little bit of an idea of what occurred, our response to this situation, and how we are going to move forward. A lot of the issues and a lot of the answers about what occurred last night are frankly going to rest with the Arapahoe County Coroner's Office. The coroner is going to be the one who is going to have to obviously determine the cause of death of this community member, and as well as any contributing factors that may have gone into that. So I wanted to make sure that I get that out right from the beginning, and also understand that anything that we say right now is subject to change, again, because of the fact that this is such a complex investigation and it is active. As was said, we had officers respond to the 10600 block of East Jewell last night at approximately 6:14 p.m. They were responding to a family disturbance call. There were 3 officers that were initially dispatched to the call, 1 male officer and 2 female officers. Upon their approach to the apartment, the officers could hear a great deal of screaming. This is, and I should back up here a little bit, each of the officers had their body-worn cameras on, and I have personally been able to view the body cam footage, and so what I'm relaying to you right now is what I viewed personally from those body cameras. So on their approach, they could hear screaming. You can hear screaming on the body cam footage, and you can hear someone yelling for help, and you see a woman standing outside the door of the apartment pointing inside. As officers went inside, there was a large African-American male who was violently choking another male in the apartment. There were several other people in the apartment, including several small children. The officers immediately gave orders to the man to stop choking the other man. He refused, and at one point during this exchange, officers activated and initiated the use of the taser. The tasers had absolutely no impact on this man. The man then immediately rushed at the officers, tackling 1 or 2 of them at the same time, and then as this was happening, the fight then went outside. And it was outside the apartment door where the 3 officers and this man were involved in a very violent fight. During this entire fight, you can hear the officers giving the man orders to stop resisting, to comply, to get on the ground. There were, again, several attempts with tasers, several attempts with our batons, and just use of the hands to get this man to comply and to get him on the ground. And again, there was no impact as far as getting this man to stop being violent. At one point, the man actually grabbed a baton that one of the officers was holding. This would be the male officer. The male officer and the man were then basically in kind of a tug-of-war for this baton. There were several orders to the man to let go of the baton. He refused. Again, less lethal tactics were used. Those, again, had no impact on the man. At one point, the man was able to actually start choking the male officer. He was actually choking him. They were face to face, and he was actually choking the officer while they were struggling there. And again, less lethal tactics were used without much effect. This fight went on for several minutes, and I got to tell you folks, I've been in this job for 35 years, seen a lot of stuff, and this was one of the most violent altercations I have seen in my career. You can imagine this, like as I said, was getting ready to say, this fight lasted, went on, at least just with those three, for almost 7 minutes. That is a long time for folks to be fighting. At one point during this fight, one of the officers was at least able to ask for help, and at that point, officers from throughout the city responded. One of the things to keep in mind is that officers, the cover officers or responding officers who were responding to that call for help, they didn't just arrive within 30 seconds. It took a few minutes for them to get there. And so again, while this is all happening, these officers are still trying to gain compliance and gain control of this man. The entire time while this man is fighting with our officers, neighbors as well as family members can be heard yelling at him to stop resisting and to comply, and he refused to do as he was instructed by them as well. There were a couple times when there would be a lull in the fight, and then the man would start right back up again, and again the violent encounter was continued between the three officers and this man. At one point, as officers began arriving, they were able to get the man on the ground. He was still actively resisting. They got him on the ground, and they began trying to get him handcuffed. They had to pin him, and at one point, they noticed that he became unresponsive. When they noticed that he had become unresponsive, they initiated CPR, and at that point, Aurora Fire was called, and Aurora Fire quickly arrived and continued treating the patient. The patient was transported to the hospital, and it was pronounced deceased upon arrival. I'll back up here. The officers, again, that were involved in this was one was a male officer. He's been on the department since June of 2017. The other was a female officer. She is a lateral officer and has been with the Aurora Police Department since February of 2016. And the other is another female officer who has been on the department since June of 2017. Again, there were several attempts by our officers to use a number of different less lethal options, which included use of the taser, use of baton, use of their hands, and giving numerous verbal commands in an attempt to de-escalate. And again, nothing was having an effect on this man. And so again, this resulted in a very prolonged violent fight. At this point, before we go into questions, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to District Attorney Brockler, and then we will answer any questions that you might have.
Yeah, thanks, Chief. Thanks. Just for those back there transcribing this, my name's George Brockler. I'm B-R-A-U-C-H-L-E-R. I'm the District Attorney for the 18th Judicial District, which includes Arapahoe County, and the portion this thing occurred. We became involved in this when I got a phone call last night from Chief Metz, and I want to say, and I commend the Chief and Aurora for this, there's no obligation under the law for there to be a call out of other agencies, including even our office, to investigate things that take place that result in the death of anyone in the community. The change in the law that we had in the Colorado Revised Statutes a couple years ago applies only to officer-involved shootings. Nonetheless, the chief said, this is one that I think really just in the name of transparency and being able to be responsive to the community, picked up the phone and called and said, can we please treat this like an officer-involved shooting? And we did that. They called out Denver detectives who have already started the process of participating and leading this investigation. Our office has been involved. At this point, the things that remain unknown are important things to get answers to before more information is given to the public. So for instance, there's an autopsy. We've got to get a coroner's report back. We've got to get toxicological reports back. I've seen this body cam. It is not anything that I have seen before, and I've only been doing this 24 years because I'm significantly younger than Chief Metz. But I've never seen anything quite like this. And so it's important to sort of understand, not sort of, it is important to understand what was driving this person to make some of the decisions they appear to have made on this video and be able to respond in the way that they were. And I echo what the chief said. I saw a lot of deployments of tasers there. Seem to have no impact whatsoever on this particular individual. The other things that have to finish taking place are, there are other officers involved, there are neighbors that were witnesses to this, and it's important that we get all those interviews done. Now there's body cam, you've heard about this, from several officers. I know that Chief Metz would, if he could, and I suppose he could force it and put it out right now. I have asked him, as I've done in the past, respectfully, please do not release the body cam until we've had the opportunity to finish the investigation. And part of that will also be to analyze any other video that may be out there in the community from folks who may have witnessed this particular event. It is important when someone in the community dies, especially during the contact with law enforcement, that we get all the answers that the community would demand to have answers to, all those questions answered before we come forward with all the rest of the information here. And that's where we're at today. I wish I could give you more. I know the chief wants to give you more, but I've asked him not to for the moment. But if there's any other questions, please.
We'll go ahead and take questions.
How big was this guy?
He was a pretty big guy. He was 5'9", 230 pounds. He was very muscular. And again, just an individual that just was feeling no pain upon officers attempting to gain compliance and gain control.
At what point do you justify lethal force?
That's a really good question, and there, to be completely honest with you, there were probably some times in there where I believe lethal force may have been justified, but I think our officers were, thinking, very clearly about what the impacts of that could be, not only to the man, but anybody who's around the immediate area who could obviously become part of any kind of a crossfire situation. So I think the officers, made the right call on that.
But if an officer's being choked, that kind of situation would warrant lethal force?
It totally could.
Did any of the less lethal measures by officers include a chokehold?
At one point, it does appear there may have been an attempt to do that, but I don't think it had any, obviously it didn't have any impact.
And how about the man's age?
I believe he's in his 30s.
We understand the officers are out of the hospital, and have you been able to talk with them? How are they doing after such a violent encounter with the suspect?
Yes, so I visited the officers last night in the hospital. Both officers were doing okay, obviously pretty banged up. They are very thankful that the situation turned out the way it did for them as far as not being any more seriously hurt.
Two more questions?
I know it's early, but can you offer an explanation at all on his non-compliance? Any indicators for anything that would have made him so non-compliant?
It would be speculative on my part, and I think, again, this is where we really need to depend on the coroner. And it also, we have to really depend on the officer's statements to really get a clear idea of what they saw, what they observed. And I think when you take that information of, what we can find in the body cameras, on the body-worn camera footage, what we find with the officer's statements, and then again, the science of the coroner's report, I think then you'll be able to come up with some kind of a conclusion. The coroner's report obviously is going to include a full autopsy, as Mr. Brockler said. They're going to do a toxicology exam and a whole host of different things that will go into hopefully giving us some answers of why he was the way he was, why he was not compliant, and just not seeming to, follow the directives of the officers.
Suspect was not armed at any point in time.
He personally was not armed, but as I said before, at one point he did attempt to grab the officer's baton, and actually, what I forgot to mention earlier, at one point tried to grab one of the officer's tasers. Now, we mentioned also that the taser was deployed a few times. One of the things to keep in mind is there's two ways to use a taser. One is with a cartridge in which it fires the barbs, and obviously the person goes down. That's the one I think the public is more used to hearing about. And again, you typically only get one shot at that unless you have an extra cartridge, and then you've got to replace that. The other option on how to use it is you remove the cartridge, and it's called drive stun. It's kind of like a stun gun, so you put it up against a person's body. There were several attempts to do that. He never flinched. When he was struck with the baton, he just looked at the officers. I mean, it just, again, just almost no recognition of any pain that he was receiving.
Any additional charges or anything against people that were in the apartment at the time? That you guys
No. The folks that were in the apartment were very cooperative. They've been cooperative throughout the investigation. Our victim advocates have been working with the family and making sure that they're getting whatever assistance they may need.
Chief, the gender on the folks who went to the hospital, the officers, was it two females, a male, female?
One male officer went to the hospital and one female officer went to the hospital. Okay? All right. Thank you, folks.
Thank you very much. We will put out an updated press release later on this evening. Thank you.